Old stories like long lost friends, rodeos and late night bends, history before our time, round pens and pasture rides, cowboys of the Osage.
Howdy, friends and neighbors. Time once again for the Cowboys of the Osage podcast with your host, Jimbo Snively and Cody Garnett. Now let's sing a little bit about it. Cowboys of the Osage, riding once again. Always got some time for a friend. And here they are, the Cowboys of the Osage.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cowboys of the Osage podcast, brought to you by the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum, Buck and Flamingo Turquoise Shop, and now Saucy Calf, traditional Native American food, all located right here in historic downtown Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Hey, it's old Cody over here. I don't have my main man with me today. I have my other main man with me today. He's a guy that he's one of the head committee men over at the 101 Ranch Rodeo. He's a heck of a good roper, a rancher, an historian, and a good friend of mine, Hank Hainzinger. Good to see you, Hank.
Hey, Cody.
Who do we have here today?
It's my pleasure. It's another great day in the Osage, and we've got a really good show tonight. We've got Joe Glazier from Ponca City. He's the 101 historian, and he knows all about it. And we got Sonya Abercrombie from Ponca City. She is the curator of the Marland Grand Home in Ponca City and looks after the 101 Ranch memorabilia collection.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the 101 Ranch with Joe and Sonya and bring some of the old life back to life.
How's that rodeo looking this year, Hank?
That rodeo's looking good. It's been 65 years old.
Coming up second week in June?
Second weekend in June, be 6, 7, and 8. So
mark your calendars.
We'll
get into that a little later.
Yeah.
Joe, 101 Ranch. Where do them boys originate at?
I got to correct you right off the bat.
Oh, crud.
It's not 101, it's 101.
Yes, sir. You got it.
Thank you.
101. It's not every day. I was just a little nervous with a true blue historian in here.
Yeah. 101. Well, Joe, how did that ranch, how was it kind of started, or the Miller family? Give us a little back history.
Well, it starts back around before the Civil War. George Washington Miller was, when he was born, his father was a drunk, and his mother finally divorced him and took little George Washington back to the plantation, and that's where he got his training of plantation style. And he grew up on the plantation, and then the Civil War came, and of course this was in Crab Orchard, Kentucky, so they were on the side of the South. He fought in several of the big campaigns, and I don't know whether he got hurt or what have you, but he went back home early. After the war was over, nothing was the same for plantation life, and he got very disgruntled, so much so that his first son, he named him Wilkes Booth. Wilkes Booth killed Lincoln, and George Washington didn't like that. But he packed up all his stuff and got on the train and headed west. He was headed for California, just as far as he could go. Well, the train tracks ended in Newtonia, Missouri. That's as far as he could go by train. From then on, he was covered wagon. But he decided to stay in Newtonia for a while. He did come up with I don't know whether he bought it or just bought it off of somebody else, but he had a kind of a mercantile store there that Molly ran, his wife, while he was off running around looking for cattle and stuff like that. At that time, the cattle drives had to go that far to catch a railroad to ship their livestock back east, and he got acquainted with a bunch of cowboys and realized that when they came to Newtonia, they kept eating pork, which Newtonia was a pig part of the country. And he found out that these cowboys lived down in Texas on stringy old longhorn. When Cookie needed some meat, they'd go out there and pick out something that was about ready to die, and that's what they had for meat. So he devised the idea that he would start buying hogs and curing it, and by springtime he had 20,000 pounds. He acquired or leased 10 wagons and riders to drive them. Each wagon carried 2,000 pounds. And they headed off down south through Missouri and western Arkansas until they got down around Fort Smith, and then they angled over down through Indian Territory into Texas. Down in there somewhere, he traded these 20 pounds of pork for 400 head of longhorns. Drove them back up, leased some land off the Quapaws in Indian Territory, and started his little venture.
Started ranching.
Yeah. There wasn't any, he wasn't permitted to put up any fences, corrals, buildings of any kind, but he did. Army come in and burned him out and arrested him. So he started thinking about going somewhere else. During this time when he was still on the Quapaw reservation, he moved his family down to Baxter Springs. So we didn't have such a long horse ride to get back and forth. And at that time, the Army had moved the Ponca tribe down to Baxter Springs. They were camped out there waiting for the government to find them a reservation down in Indian Territory. At that time, he had his second son was Joe. He was about 12 years old, and he played with the Indians, learned their language, and learned their customs and everything. He was a little white Indian, really. Well, GW wanted to go down into Indian Territory and find where he could possibly start a ranch. And there was talk of the Cherokee Strip opening up and what have you. He got down just about 9 miles southwest of Ponca City and liked that country. Right there where the Salt Fork passes on 156. And he sent Joe, mind you, he's 12 years old, sent him back to Baxter Springs on horseback by himself. And he talked to Chief White Eagle. They had a council with the other chiefs. He told him what about the land and everything, that George Washington wanted him to come down and take a look at it, see if he liked it. They went down there, and White Eagle and his chiefs liked that land, so it eventually became the reservation. The boundary, or northern boundary of the reservation, is the Salt Fork River. When it came time for them to get ready for the land run, the government drove all the cowboys and their cattle out of that Cherokee Strip. They'd been feeding cattle in there, fattening them up on the blue stem, and they had to take their cattle out and either take them up to Newtonia and ship them out, or take them back to Texas. GW went to Chief White Eagle and told him of his problem, and Chief White Eagle told him, "You got plenty of land over here on the reservation, just move them over," which he did. And they stayed there till after the run. Joe made the run. He was 17 at that time. GW had brought a thoroughbred in from Kentucky, and Joe made the run and staked a claim there.
He didn't want to lose. He got a fast horse.
No intention of losing. Joe staked the claim there, and that's the official start of the 101 Ranch. They started out the first couple of years in cattle. Cattle was doing good, and next thing you know, the bottom dropped out, and cattle weren't worth much, so he got into agriculture. And starting out, he hired all the farmers that he could find around there, and their one bottom plow and team of horses, and they plowed up 2,000 acres of land. It had to take quite some time to do that, but they got it done. They planted it to wheat. Following spring, they harvested the wheat and harvested 70,000 bushels. That convinced him that was the way to go, so they got into agriculture. And throughout the years, they raised just about anything you could think of out there.
Anything did grow.
Out there in that river bottom land, and everything grew.
But he had plantation on his mind from a young age, huh?
Yeah, and during this early period when he was setting up this ranch, and it was already getting pretty big, he decided that the 101 Ranch needed their own newspaper. So he opened up a print shop, and it was in Bliss at that time. It's now Marland. And he would print out a newspaper for all the outlying areas around the ranch so everybody knew what was going on. Well, he was a good friend of the editor down in Guthrie at their newspaper. In 1904, at the editorial convention in, I believe it was St. Louis, they went up to that convention. Well, during that convention, the Guthrie editor tried to convince them that the following year they have their convention in Guthrie. Most all of these editors from back east, and they didn't want no part of getting out in that wild Indian country and losing their scalps, so they didn't want to do it. Joe got up and told them that if they went ahead and had the convention in Guthrie, after it was over, they could come to the ranch and he'd put on a show that they'd never forget. And they agreed, and Joe immediately, when he got back to the ranch, started figuring out what he was going to do for a big show.
So he was thinking Wild West show then.
They called it Roundup back then. He was looking for acts. He had Will Rogers and...
at the first one.
Pardon?
At the first one.
Yeah, he was at the first one, and...
What'd they have Will doing? Trick roping?
He was trick roper already, and they found Tom Mix down at Guthrie at the Bluebell Saloon. He was a bartender, and they hired him.
And he hadn't been to Dewey yet.
No, I don't think so.
Before that.
I don't think. Well, he might have, because from the ranch, I think he went on to California. But Tom Mix, he was a kind of a rough-looking fella, good looks, but he was photogenic, I guess you might
Ruggedly handsome, kind of like Hank.
Yeah, it's kind of,
Yeah,
there you go.
like
I'll
that.
take that compliment.
But anyway, you had them and Lucille Mulhall.
Mulhall, Oklahoma.
Mulhall, Oklahoma.
A woman bronc rider.
I've heard of her. One of the most famous ones.
One of the most famous ones.
Didn't she rope too? Tie some steers
Yeah,
down?
she roped.
I think she
rode
tied
and
steers
some
down.
Well,
Yeah.
she had,
She was a woman world's champion, or some kind world's champion ladies bronc rider, I think is what it was. But she tied steers too, I think.
well, her dad had the Mulhall Ranch down at Mulhall. The town's named after him. And they had Teddy Roosevelt there at one time.
Wow.
They were sitting at the dinner table talking, and Teddy said something about he'd like to have a wolf stuffed for the Capitol. Well, Lucille got up and excused herself and left. Sometime later, she came back. She had a wolf for Teddy. She roped it.
She roped him.
She roped it.
Wow.
So
Those ladies were just really tough. They did everything the guys did.
Oh yeah,
They did. Those were tough ladies.
frontier women were bad eggs.
You know, that used to be a thing for a cowboy to rope a coyote. I haven't heard of too many wolves, but
Yeah.
I've heard of a lot of cowboys to this day.
Trying to rope a coyote.
They'll
Try to rope a coyote.
they'll try to rope one.
Yeah. Well, who was the lady sharpshooter?
Lillian Smith, Princess Winona.
Princess Winona. There you go.
She started out in California as a little girl, about 8. She started shooting ducks and birds and rabbits and stuff to eat at home. They were pretty poor. And she got to where she could shoot ducks on the fly with a little .22 single shot. Well, as it was, sometime or another, Buffalo Bill was in that area and got acquainted with her. She was a lot older then, but he hired her for a sharpshooter in his show. He already had Annie Oakley.
Okay. Had she ever been to the 101? Annie Oakley? Yeah.
I don't think she ever was. I've never found anything that she did. It's possible, but Buffalo Bill had her, and then he had Lillian. Annie Oakley was a cultured lady, I guess you might say, dressed real nice. She was a heck of a shot with rifle or shotgun. Lillian was kind of rough around the corners. She was a little on the heavy set side and knew some good language. Neither one of them
That
got
means she'd tell you how it was.
Must be related to my mom.
There you go.
Well, they didn't get along. And she finally left. Annie Oakley stayed with the Buffalo Bill show. She went to a couple other little Wild West shows, and then she wound up with 101. And she spent the rest of her life in the shows and living on the ranch. They decided to make an Indian out of her. That's when she took the name Princess Winona. She was supposedly the daughter of Sitting Bull.
So that was her stage name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Surprising they done that long ago.
Do what?
I said that's surprising that they done that long ago, making up stage names to make something flow better.
Well, didn't it, like the one-on-one, some guys, they play more than one part during the show sometimes?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think I've done some reading up on that.
Yeah, the 101 had all kinds of costumes, and of course most of them was cowboys. They was true cowboys, but you'll find them with Angora chaps and everything like that, and they didn't usually use them out there in cockleburs and everything, but they used them for shows and stuff like that.
I always thought they might have used them up there where it's cold or something. Them
I'm
woolly
sure they
chaps.
did.
I'd sure hate to dig the coffee.
But yeah, I'd hate to be riding down through the cedar trees in them for sure.
You wouldn't want to wear them in July up in Oklahoma. But she was with the 101 Ranch Wild West shows. She went on tour with the shows. She performed in the arena there at the 101 Ranch. In her older days, well, I'll back up. There was a feller from New Jersey. His name was Emil Lenders. He was a artist, painter back east, and he wanted to paint buffalo. So he come out west, and he got acquainted with the Millers, and they took him in, and from then on, he spent his time down at the 101 Ranch and what have you. And of course, the ranch had a big herd of buffalo, so he was in hog heaven. He painted a lot of buffaloes. He painted the Ponca Indians real good. His paintings didn't, the value on them didn't come up very good back then, but he's painted all the time. Nowadays they're expensive. Willow Rock has got a bunch of them. We've got, I think, 6 of his paintings in our museum. But anyway, he finally got in with Lillian Smith, and they decided they'd get together. They bought, or Miller's probably gave it to him, 20 acres, and they called that Thunderbird Ranch. They lived there for quite some time, and then he moved on down to Oklahoma City. He had a family or a wife and I think 5 or 6 kids back in New Jersey, but I don't believe he ever went back to see them.
He grew roots.
But he died in Oklahoma City, and he's buried down there. But
So the 101, it had, back to the ranch and the farm, he built all of this stuff. We've got a picture, the grand home and the store and the blacksmith shop, and he would bring all those folks in to maintain that ranch.
in their heyday, at good times like when there was spring planting or in the fall when the harvest was on, there would be at least 600 people on the ranch. That includes the rodeo, Wild West performers. That includes people that was in the blacksmith shops. They had several blacksmith shops throughout the ranch. A lot of the people lived there on the ranch. They had all kinds of houses there. Some of them, I'm sure, lived elsewhere and just come in the morning and worked all day and went back. But their average employees down there was anywhere from about 300 to 600.
And he had their own. He printed his own money because he had a print shop.
Yeah.
And then so you had to use his money at the store to buy your
And other
fixings.
towns would take it.
Oh, really? That's what I was
other
going to say.
towns
You
would
wouldn't have no
accept
money
that
to leave
currency.
if you got paid.
George would, that's another one of the brothers. It was Joe, George, and Zach. George, he was the money man. Every so often, he would go through the towns and gather up all this currency, replace it with U.S. money, and then they'd hand it back out at the ranch. And pretty valuable now if you get a bunch of it.
Oh, yeah.
This panoramic was done in 1915. That was before they got into the huge barns and stuff. They had built a horse barn for their best stock, breeding stock and what have you. It had stalls for over 300 horses.
Holy moly.
So you can imagine how big it might be. They built another mule barn just south of it, and it was the same size. It would hold over 300 prize mules, because
That's what they farmed with.
yeah, but there was all kinds of corrals and stuff with their normal working stock all over. So who knows how many horses and mules they had.
So what was the first year they had their actual show? What year?
1905.
1905. That's when they done the deal and all the editors came, and there was 30,000 people.
65,000.
What all did that first show consist of? We know Will Rogers was there. Tom Mix was there.
They had bucking and rodeo or roping.
Steer wrestling.
Huh?
Did they have
Bill
steer
Picket?
wrestling?
Not at that time.
Not
they
at that
did?
time, okay.
Bill Picket was there. They found him down in Fort Worth. He was performing his bulldog, or when he bites a bull on the lips, and they hired him, and he came up. And Bill, from then on, stayed on the ranch. He died on the ranch, he died working for the ranch. But they had stagecoach robberies. They had Indians chasing wagon trains, all that. Any of that Western stuff, they had that there. It's just a matter of running it through the arena. They established arena for this 1905 show and had a huge bleachers type stand, and part of it actually fell down during the show.
Too many people?
Too many people.
How did all those people get there?
There was 10 charter trains from north and east. One came from Chicago, I'm sure St. Louis and surrounding areas. They was all, as I understand it, Santa Fe, or it could have been the Cody Railroad, because they was in there too, put a spur there to
At
get,
Bliss?
and they just went in one right after the other. And when it was all over, one had to back out and go, and then the next one, and then the next one. A lot of people came by horseback, by wagon. I don't know whether there's any cars in 1905 that was out there or not. I haven't seen any pictures of them. But supposedly 65,000 people showed up. A lot of them was camping out there because there wasn't any type of hotels around to take care of that.
Surprising the old Miller brothers didn't build them a big hotel.
Big
right
hotel,
there.
yeah.
They did, but it was later on.
Pay them some Hunter Run Ranch money. Hey, put that deal up there, boys. No wonder they had so many buildings.
Yeah.
If I had Buck and Flamingo money, I'd have all kind of stuff built around here.
Yeah. You got a print shop?
Naturally, you got all these people coming in there, and they all have horses and what have you, and they needed something to drink. They emptied 3 ponds, and I've often wondered what that lower part of that pond tasted like. I'm sure they had to drink it.
Yeah.
But they had a great time, had a great show. Everybody enjoyed it, and the bug bit Joe.
That's when he thought that there could be a future in this.
Yeah, and there was. And he immediately started working up a Wild West show to go on the road. And he went out the following year and toured the United States, had a great time. The bug bit him real bad. He didn't spend much time on the ranch during the summer. He was out there with the show.
Me and Hank can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah, you miss a whole lot of stuff.
Well,
Yeah, you miss a lot of stuff.
that went on
Sounds a
great
lot like rodeoing.
until 1916 they decided to take it over to England.
So that was like 1906, 1907, right there around statehood, right?
Yeah.
How did they haul that big deal around? Did they build a huge set of bleachers everywhere they went? Did they take all these huge tents everywhere? Was it like a...
Circus.
It was.
I
a
can't even
massive
imagine building a
production.
huge set of basically a big arena.
A stadium.
The Wild West show, I don't know how it was starting out, but when in its heyday, they had 600 people about that went with the show. Part of it was performers, but the vast majority of it was people that put up the tents,
Stage
people
hands.
that cooked, laundry, blacksmith, anything that they needed, they took with them. They also had 48 rail cars, part of them Pullmans, part of them carried their stock, part of them carried the working force and what have you, and all their tents, all their tent poles, all that went on that train.
How many animals?
Well, they had just about anything you could think of there. They took buffalo and horses and mules, and I did.
Elephants.
How many you
They
think
did.
would they haul?
I don't know how many. I'm sure they had a lot. But they would come into a town and they would always park on the far end of the town so that they could parade all their wagons and horses and buffalo. It all went down Main Street, and then they set up on the other end of the street.
But they wouldn't stay there very long. They moved this massive operation every day. We've got their log of what towns. So they do the show. They pack up all this massive operation. They had it down. I mean, and they moved that thing every day.
Sometimes they stayed for maybe 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, but most of the towns, they only stayed in there for a day or so.
Would they send someone ahead to
They
buy
had.
to to buy grain and hay and stuff for the animals, or would they haul it all with them?
They shipped that. They had an advance.
I forgot they had all those guys back home getting paid with that one-on-one ranch money farming
They
for
couldn't
them.
leave. They couldn't leave.
They had an advance car that went out ahead of them, and they would plaster posters up and make the arrangements and all that sort of stuff. Once on through the time in their heyday there, they were rivaling Ringling Brothers and all them circuses. They'd come through town, they'd plaster their posters up, and then Ringling or somebody would come through and they'd plaster theirs on top. And a lot of times they'd come back and plaster 101 Ranch over that. But they did all the arrangements, and then the show would come in, they'd set up and have the show, sometimes 2 or 3 nights, sometimes one, and move on.
So they had some competition though at the time.
Oh, there
like
was a lot
Pawnee
of
Bill
competition.
and Buffalo Wild Bill Cody, Buffalo
Yeah.
Bill. They were all, and
They
Pawnee
were.
Bill and the 101 was only actually about 30 miles apart.
About that.
Yeah.
P.T. Barnum, all of them was traveling around at that time.
The P.T. Barnum with the circus.
I think they bought out a circus, didn't they?
The Miller Brothers bought several circuses out for their livestock, for their show wagons, and they had some very ornate show wagons that they took through the parade. They paraded through the arena. And Pawnee Bill and the 101 Ranch, they would trade wagons back and forth. So
They kind of worked together a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah, they
They
did.
did.
Did they ever combine their show?
No, they did not do that. Buffalo Bill, when he sold his show, that was in 1915 or 16, he came to the 101 Ranch, and for 1 year, he was part of the 101 Ranch show. He went out,
There you go.
walked in, or rode in when you first come into the parade or the arena and what have you. Speaking of arena, these people that come in to set up, that's the first thing they had to do is build an arena. So
They didn't have portable
They didn't
panels
have
back
portable
then.
panels.
No portable panels.
Or a portable rope and shooter, nothing.
and as far as the
They didn't have
wood.
prefer. They didn't have no prefer.
They had dig post holes for that deal, I bet.
Man.
as far as the food is concerned, at the ranch, they had a refrigerated car, probably another car too, that they would fill with meat, vegetables, stuff like that, all the edibles they need. And that car would go out and catch the show, whatever town it was in, and they supplied their own food. They didn't want to buy anything off the local towns because they raised
Wanted
their
all
prices.
The money. They wanted all the money.
And it's amazing that they could do something like that because, you know, they was out on the road from May till October, sometimes November. They was out all summer.
So they had the likes of, so the people that's like been there had been like the Will Rogers, the Tom Mix, the Bill Picketts,
Luke Gibson.
the Gibson.
Yeah.
There's no.
There was a
big one,
number
yeah.
of cowboys that moved on from the ranch into silent movies. Helen Gibson was one of the female cowgirls that became a star out in silent movies and then on into talkies. Tom Mix was king of the cowboys, and he got his start on the 101 Ranch and then moved on to Hollywood. And
Didn't they bring Tom Mix also to help charm the ladies at the Dude Ranch?
yeah, well, after he was there on the ranch for a while, they established the Bar L, which was about, 15, 16 miles southeast of the 101 Ranch. And it was a place for the dudes and people that come in, if they wanted to live like a cowboy out on a trail drive or something, they could go down there. Basically, they slept under the stars in a sleeping bag. They ate off of a campfire.
They had to rough it.
They roughed it, and they sent Tom Mix down there to be the good-looking cowboy for the young gals that were riding horses and eating at the campfires and what have you. And I'm sure he put on a show.
Boy, he had a rough life, didn't he?
Yeah, it's a tough life. Yeah.
Didn't he upset one fella?
Yeah, he was on the ranch, and this couple from back east, they were young. They come out to the ranch to have some fun on the ranch and see what cowboy life was like. And Tom Mix started hitting on his wife, and he didn't like it. So he went to Joe and complained about it, and Joe said he'd take care of it. Anyway, it didn't stop, and the guy went back and talked to Joe and said, well, you're probably going to have a duel with him. Well, the guy didn't know nothing about a gun, but they sent somebody out to, no, this was Zach. I'm sorry, I got it the wrong one. Zach was the one that was hitting on him. Anyway, they took somebody out there to teach him how to shoot a gun. And I guess he got pretty good. And Zach was the one that was hitting on his wife, and
I think Tom Mix was hitting on his wife, and Zach was the ornery one setting up the
could have been
the fireworks, because wasn't he baiting Tom Mix?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be a great idea. It'll be the best show ever. Oh, you'll be famous. Think of the publicity you're going to get. And Tom,
Modern day showman.
yes, he was. He was a prankster. The one thing the Miller brothers were promoters. Joe and Zach, they promoted like no other. They, if it'd get them some attention and they lived for that. They lived for the drama.
I heard of a heck of a promotion they did one time.
Well, when it come to the time for the duel, Joe, might have been Zach, told the fella not to worry about it because he was afraid he was going to get shot. So we're going to put blanks in both your guns. So he was okay with that. Well, when they got ready to do that, Zach told the cowboy to run over and tell Tom Mix that this guy had a loaded gun, and they couldn't get the shells from him. And when the guy come out there, Tom Mix turned around and ran through the barn out the backside, and they didn't see him for a week.
They bluffed him out.
They did.
Greenhorn, he ate that up. He chased a cowboy plumb out of the country. So
Well, I think of Tom Mix. I think he was bad to chase the women and had a few
he
wives.
was. He was.
Yeah.
But Zach was a troublemaker. I mean, he enjoyed teasing and all that sort of stuff. And it was so bad that at that time they also had a plantation down in Louisiana, pecan plantation. Well, they would tell Zach to get his butt down there and stay down there for a while and let everything cool down up here. Well, when he finally come back, he'd bring something with him. He brought a cub bear once, and the bear grew up. The bear liked soda pop, and that's all he wanted. He finally killed him. Another time he brought up a little alligator, so they built a pen and a little pond there that he could swim in. The pond is still there out at the ranch. So I don't know what all he brought, but he was an ornery little old feller.
They had a jail there at the ranch, and
No, they didn't.
well, it was for that bear, wasn't it? They put that. What was it for?
The gorillas.
See,
A
that's
gorilla.
that's how all these stories get started.
Okay, well, that's why we've got you here.
The Millers had
Hank's
bought
bad
us.
about it.
Yeah.
I said Hank's bad about that. I don't know. Stop.
Millers had bought a circus out, and in this circus was a gorilla. So when they got, I suppose they probably knew they was going to get the gorilla, so they built this rock building with a cage in the back. For some reason, the cage was about 3 feet off the floor, 2 feet, something like that. The gorilla would have to climb up to get in there. Anyway, that's where he was at, but he didn't last very long. He died. So then they converted it over to a monkey house. They started raising monkeys. And I guess monkeys are prolific like rabbits, because the next thing you know, they had monkeys all over the place. Molly had her own pet monkey in the White House. He stayed she had a sunroom there where she raised her flowers and everything. The monkey was in there. She had one of them green-looking parrots in there that talked. Well, one day they had an order for monkeys for down to Oklahoma City, I assume the zoo. So they loaded up a wagon full of them, and they headed on down to Oklahoma City with it. Well, sometime after that, she missed her monkey. And they hunted all over and couldn't find it. Well, somebody decided that maybe it got in with them other monkeys. So they had a cowboy get on a horse and ride down there and check it out. Well, sure enough, her monkey was in that cage. So he brought it back to her, so she had her monkey back. Stuff like that happened almost every day out there at the ranch.
Can you imagine driving across the prairie there at the 101, and you're driving by and you see camels and lions and tigers and bears? Crazy. They had ostriches. And there's so many stories about people driving by and, wow, I saw a camel on the prairie. I think I need a drink, or I need to stop drinking. I saw a camel on the prairie.
Yeah.
And they were just that way, bigger than life. That was an amazing time.
They didn't stay in the lion and tiger business very long. They acquired them in probably be that same circus that they got the gorilla. And there again, they must have known that it was coming. They probably bought it after the end of the season. But they built a big round barn at the ranch. It was just south of the mule barn. And they had a big cage in it for these lions and tigers. And they hired a lion tamer to work them and perform with them. But it wasn't too long, and the lions got him, mauled him up pretty bad, so they sold their lions and tigers and got out of the business. They used that barn from then on for training elephants and what have you. They had 6 elephants, too.
Did they work them elephants a little bit?
All the time.
All the time.
The elephants went with the circus. I'm sure they used them to unload wagons.
Did they work them on the farm?
Well, there's a picture of an elephant with Molly's brother sitting up on top of the elephant's head. Joe is standing down in a spiffy gray 3-piece suit, big Stetson on with his fingers in his lapel and standing there watching. They had a huge leather strap around this elephant, chest strap, and it went back to a disc, a harrow, and a planter behind it.
They was going to do one pass farming.
The only thing, and it probably only takes a farmer to catch, the little disc here and a little one section harrow, and then a drill back here that they wouldn't match up. It was a promotion deal. But I'm sure they used the elephants on the ranch. In the morning, the elephant trainer would take them on the road north to the first mile road headed west. They'd head over there about a quarter of a mile and then turned in back south, and that's where the elephants stayed during the day. There was a lot of foliage for them, and they had a tank there that was about, 3-4 foot high and about 20-25 feet apart or across, made of concrete. It's still there. It's in bad shape, but it's on private property. But I've got pictures of it. We went and saw it one time. And then they would bring them back in the evening time. They they had employees for just about everything you could think of out there.
You imagine bouncing across the prairie on your old trusty steed, popping up over a hill.
Horse spooks at an elephant.
A horse sees 6 elephants standing down there pulling leaves out of a tree. You couldn't get anybody to believe that. It'd be hard to believe.
It would. It was, it's a shame that it's not still there. And, of course, E.W. Marland was another big part of the 101 Ranch. You want to hear about him?
Well, how did the 101 get its brand?
There you go.
There's been several thoughts on that. One that we go with, and Joe Miller Jr. is the one that claimed it was true. GW had taken a bunch of cowboys down into Texas to pick up a herd, and they had something like 2,000 or 3,000 that they had bought down south of San Antonio. So they was almost to Mexico. Anyway, when they got back up to San Antonio, GW let them cowboys go into town to have a little fun. Well, in this one corner, there was a saloon, and the proprietor had named it 101 because that was the number on the street. The cowboys got in there, had a gay old time, got drunk, and they tore the place up. GW went in and paid for the damages. One of the cowboys going out, because he'd run them back to the herd, he tore that 101 on the sign off the side of the building and took it with him. And when they got to the camp, they nailed it to the side of the chuck wagon.
You seeing a pattern here?
GW, after he paid all that money to repair the saloon, made 101 his trail brand. He made them brand every one of them steers on the rump with 101 so that they wouldn't forget what they had done. They watched that 101 all the way back up to the ranch.
They had to think about that good time, didn't they?
But then he used it for his brand, and it was that way ever since.
That Lonesome Dove?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They nailed the...
Yeah.
They were some pretty big promoters. What about the time they were promoting where Geronimo was going to come shoot his last buffalo?
Well, that gets into E.W. Marland too. This was the 19...
I do want to hear about EW too, for sure.
That was the first editorial convention. One of his acts that he wanted was have Geronimo come up and shoot his last buffalo. Geronimo was imprisoned at Fort Sill.
Right.
In order to get him up there, this colonel, who was a nephew of E.W. Marland, he was stationed down there, and I think he had 10 soldiers and Geronimo, and they came up for this show. They had a locomobile, which is one of them big open-topped cars back in that day.
Convertible.
So I guess they had cars at that time because they had that. Geronimo shot this buffalo, and I'm sure they had it rounded up and coaxed it over to him and what have you. He did shoot it, and he, by the way, that was his first buffalo because there wasn't any buffalo in the mountains where he was at.
That was his last and his first.
His first and his last.
That's how these stories get started.
Yeah.
But I've got a picture of him skinning the buffalo. And but when we get to E.W. Marland, I'll let you know how that winds up. But Geronimo had these little hats that he wore, and people would come up and want to buy his hat. Well, he would bargain with them and sell his hat. After they left, he'd go back in his teepee and get him another hat and go back out there. And I don't know how many hats he sold, but he had quite a business going on.
Enterprising as well.
He was. He was a smart Apache. But
Well, so how many, back to the ranch, I mean, I think it's just astonishing the size and the scope of that. I mean, we've talked a lot about the show, but the ranch itself was huge, you know, like so many hogs and dairy cows and steers and cow and calf pairs. And
they averaged about
the
110,000 acres. They would butcher 20 hogs and 10 beeves a day to keep meat on the table for all the people there to keep it shipped out to the Wild West show that was on the road. And people in the surrounding towns would buy their meat and vegetables, stuff right there at the ranch. They had their own vegetable store right on the east side of the highway there that they sold all the produce that was on the ranch.
So he would market his own stuff.
And they each had their individual talents. George was the financial guy. Joe was the oldest, and he was plantation style. He was, a cultured man. And he was the one that mostly entertained the people that came in because he had that style with him. Molly was a plantation lady, his mother, and she took care of the house. And as I understand, the house was never locked. Anybody that came to the ranch was invited in. And on that house, how many people do they say slept on the top floor?
The house was a 3-story. First story was where they entertained. They had the kitchen, living room, all that sort of stuff. Second room was bedrooms. They had 5 baths up there. It's hard to look at that foundations there now and understand how they got all that in there. But the third floor was one big room that they could sleep 90 people. Now, I'm sure they was probably bunk beds.
That's a big
And in
Airbnb.
those days,
Barrack style.
Yeah, barrack style.
in those days, they sleep more than one to a bed. So it's hard to believe that, but that's what they said.
Wasn't it billed as the most diversified farm on earth?
Yeah.
Which one was the cattle buyer? One of them.
Zach was a cattleman. He was professional as far as knowing good stock from bad stock, mules, horses, whatever the case may be. If they needed something, they'd send Zach to get it. They had a huge a sheep herd. Now, you don't hardly ever see sheep on a cattle ranch, but they had them. They had their own gin right north of Marland. They produced their cotton.
They had their own electric plant, somebody told
They
me.
had their own electric plant
Telephone system.
and telephone system. The sheep were sheared. They went through the cotton gin. They produced their own canvas and made all their tents. Everything they had was made right there on the ranch. All their tent poles and all that was cut down there on the river. What was that we were saying?
Well, Zach was the herdsman, the cows, but they were pioneers, weren't they, in crossbreeding things?
Joe was the one that did that. He always wanted to try something different.
Didn't they do something with hogs? They
breeded hogs. They breeded cattle. He was a horticulturist. He would graft. Some of them never made it, but they did a lot of grafting. And in its heyday, at that time, OSU was Oklahoma A&M. They would send their agricultural students up to the ranch to spend the summer learning what Joe was doing.
And that would have been in about what year?
It had been in the 20s.
In the 20s, okay.
That was their heyday. And their gardens, you think of a little garden around behind the barn or something, but theirs was by the acre. There's pictures of nothing but an onion patch that's acres, maybe 2 acres or 3. Cabbage patches. That's all that was in there, the whole thing, cabbage. But most any vegetable that you could grow in this country, they grew out there. Joe was up in Ark City one time, and there was a boxcar there that was full of apple trees, little saplings, that somebody had ordered and turned down. So he bought it and had them ship it to Bliss, and then he hired a bunch of farmers to build him or plant him 2 apple orchards. One was on the north side of the house, one was on the east side of the house. when the apple trees grew up where they was producing great, first of all, when they bloomed, everybody in town would go out there and smell the apple blossoms and see how pretty it is. There was acres and acres, was nothing but blossoms on these trees. But when they were ready to pick, they would pick 40,000 bushels of apples.
Man, oh man.
It's hard to fathom that many apples, but we've got film and we've got pictures of wagons coming into the storage building. They had a huge brick building, and it was ventilated in some ways to keep air going through all these stalls that they packed these apples in. But it's crazy.
I know what you're thinking.
I'm thinking apple pie.
Cobbler is what I was going to say, yeah. That's what I was going to say.
I'm thinking apple pie and vanilla ice cream's where I'm at.
Well, in Miller fashion, they built a cider factory.
Getting better all the time.
State of the art. They had stainless steel tanks up on the second floor that were steam heated. They would cook the apples up there and then transfer them some way, shape, or form down to the first floor, and that's where they produced apple cider, applesauce, whatever you could make out of an apple, they made. And that sold in their store, and they shipped it all over the country. Zach, the only thing I know he was in as far as edibles is he produced his own barbecue sauce. And that was sold all over the country. I'm sure that came from the fact that he was in Louisiana. And
He liked a little
little spice.
spice.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I apologize.
Do what?
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's fine. I don't know when to quit.
I want to get around to when they went over to overseas with the show.
That was in 1916. They boarded a ship, got over to England, started producing their show over there, showing it. They showed it in front of Queen Elizabeth and the dignitaries, and Emperor of Russia was there. But while they was there, World War I started.
Oh, man.
And the British, right on, confiscated all their horses, their wagons, anything they could use for the war effort they took.
Commandeered.
And I understand it took them a long time to get all of their entourage back to the United States because ships was not available and what have you. But they did get...
Kind of stuck there.
Didn't they go to Germany? They managed to get to Germany.
Not
Not
there.
They had some
They
Native
lost
Americans.
a bunch of Sioux Indians. I don't know whether they were over in Germany or what have you, but as I understand it, they didn't make it back.
Didn't Russia or somebody arrest some of the Indians and thought they were some
mistaken for Syrians, yes.
Serbian spies?
Could have been.
Yes.
And they said that those guys might not ever been seen again.
Could have been.
That was the story I heard, just Jimbo.
But they finally got everybody back. And
Except for maybe them guys.
Yeah. I think,
Almost
Barton,
everybody back.
G.R. Carter's great uncle
Yeah.
went with them over there, old Barton Carter. I have a picture somewhere of him on the steamship
you tell stories too?
with a bunch of Indians headed over there that the family had given us. I could show it
Well,
to
that
you.
might have been part of the 101.
I'm about 99.9% sure it was.
Well, they once they got back, they didn't start the Wild West show up again until 1921. Then it went back. Joe had the bug. They worked up another show. And at one time, they had two shows. One went overseas. One toured the United States and South America. But then it went on until 1931. 31, the downfall of the ranch was already starting. Joe and George were gone. Zach took the show out trying to make money to hang on to the ranch, and when they made it to D.C., they were out of money. So the employees and people with the ranch, the show, wouldn't go any farther. It was stuck right there. They hadn't been paid or nothing.
They should have sent a trainload of that 101 ranch money up there.
At that time, it wasn't worth nothing. But I believe it was Lou Wentz in Ponca City sent the money out there to get everything back home. But then they lost it all anyway.
But that was kind of the trend, economics and stuff, but also the movies, which they got into, was also part of the demise because it was so expensive to put on those Wild West shows. We cannot imagine today the extravagant shows they had, but when you could go to a movie for just a little bit, families could afford to go to the movies rather than pay. It had to be a considerable price to go to one of the Wild West shows. Wasn't that part of the decline?
Well,
do you think?
the movies was what was the demise of the show because, like you say, people could go to a movie. They could go every day if they wanted to. You probably paid a nickel to get in. And the rodeo, the Wild West shows were competing with that part of the
It was
competition.
kind of the trend that was kind of leaning
And it
going
wasn't
away from that.
wasn't only the 101 Ranch. Your circuses and everybody was hurting when the movies came out.
But the 101 got in on the movie business too, also,
did.
right?
That was
did.
before it was right after they started the Wild West show. They started producing, I can't think of his first name. His last name was Ince. He was a movie producer from back east. I think it was New Jersey. They was doing Western movies back there, but
Now these were silent, right?
silent. But they didn't have the livestock. They didn't have the wide open ranges and stuff like that. So he came out here and wanted to start producing. Well, the 101 Ranch had the longhorns, they had the buffalo, they had the horses, they had the cowboys, cowgirls. It just fell right in. And they produced a lot of movies down there at 101 Ranch until the one Wild West show wintered in California. And that's when they realized that they had a gold mine with their cowboys and cowgirls and livestock and everything. They farmed them all out to the movie makers out there, and they started producing out there. So they capitalized on it and started their own Bison Films. And
I
from
wonder if Tom Mix was working for the 101 when he.
I don't think he was. I think he was already out there. I might be wrong, but
And then there was that Yakima Canuck.
he was on the ranch.
He was on the ranch. Wow. That was John Wayne stuntman
Yeah,
back
that
in the
was John
early
Wayne's
days.
Early first time. Yeah,
He was a rodeo guy too, wasn't he?
World
World champ.
Yakima. Yeah.
Ben Johnson was on the ranch too. As a boy, his dad performed in the rodeos.
Ben
and what have you.
Senior.
Well,
Ben
you know, we had someone writing Ben Johnson Jr.'s autobiography through the other day, and I said, I got a picture of Ben Johnson Sr. at the 101 Ranch winning some kind of roping or something. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
And, she could never find any evidence of Ben Johnson Sr. being on the 101 Ranch, and I know she hadn't got a hold of the right people is what I'm thinking because
I got it.
I know it's there.
Yeah, there's a picture of a bunch of performers there, 101 Ranch. Ben Johnson Sr. is standing there.
Don't he got his hat up like that or something right in the center?
No, but little Ben, he was sitting down in front of him. He was probably 12, 14 years old, something like that.
Did they used to have like roping contests during the 101 Ranch deals? Was it turning into somewhat of a rodeo? Was it a contest amongst some of the guys?
Well, the
in it?
101 Ranch, early on, most every Sunday they would have a show. And it was just, the cowboys would go out there and rope livestock, what have you. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Early on, people from Ponca City, probably some of the other towns, would go out there on Sunday just to sit in the bleachers and watch the cowboys out there playing around. And it got to be, I think they did it just about every Sunday. They'd have a show out there in the arena. The arena would hold about 5,000 people. And they would
Cheyenne size probably too.
Oh, yeah.
So they would perform there, and I don't imagine they charged anything. Just let them come in there and sit and watch them play. That was a way of the cowboys cooling off, and the cowgirls was the same way. They were out there roping just like the cowboys were. They were bulldogging and all that sort of stuff.
And Bill Picket, he was doing the bulldogging, and they actually started bulldogging. They was bulldogging off the left side.
Yeah, I've got some footage of him steer roping.
I saw that one time a while
Steers
back.
were not very small. They was great big ones. But he would throw that rope around their horns, and then he would ride his horse around the back side of it, take off, and that rope would tighten up on the hind legs, and he'd flip that steer, come here, come higher water. And he didn't have to go there and throw him back down. He was down.
Did he invent bulldogging on the 101, or was he doing it before?
He did that down in Texas.
Okay, that's what I thought you said right at the beginning. I hadn't heard that. Where was he doing that down in Texas at?
Well, Bill was
You said Fort Worth, but that's all I got out of it. So I don't.
Bill was born down in eastern Texas, and he had, I don't know, 3 or 4 brothers. And after the Civil War, there was a great need for beef back east. Well, during the war, there was no cowboys down there to deal with the cattle, so the cattle was just running wild. And down in Texas, you got your sagebrush and thickets and stuff like that, and they were so darn dense that them longhorns would get out in there and they couldn't throw a rope around the horns. So they went to bulldogs. They'd sick them dogs in there, and they'd clamp down on their nose, and the bull would stand there until a cowboy got there and throw the rope around its horns and drug it out. Well, Bill saw that, and he thought, well, shoot, if a
Dog can do it.
dog
I
can
can
do it, he could do it. And that's where he started doing that. And he went to Fort Worth to perform there. And I don't know, he'd probably been there for quite a while, but Zach and Joe was there at one of the big shows and saw him perform, and I'm sure they gave him a price that was better than what he was doing, so he quit that down there and come to the 101 Ranch.
And he made a permanent home there and died there
He was
at
permanent.
the ranch, and he's buried just south of the ranch at
Yeah,
Marland.
he got killed. Zach, well, this was when the ranch was going down. The government was in there selling off everything. It was pretty well gone. And they come in, there was a corral full of horses. Some of them belonged to Zach. Well, they were going to sell the whole kit and caboodle. Bill went out there to call Zach's horses out, and one of them spooked and swung its head and hit Bill and slammed him into the corral and put him down. They took him to the hospital, and 10 days later he died. And he's buried up on Monument Hill. He's the only one buried up there that has a tombstone. So we know where he's at. The other ones, we didn't know where they was at all. And one year we had Coronation bring their ground search equipment out there, and we located all the graves.
How many graves are there?
There's, I believe there's 7, and then Bill, and then there's a big round one, and that's Spradley, his horse.
Right.
He's buried up there too.
He loved Spradley. Wasn't there something in Mexico where Spradley got hurt, injured?
Yeah, is it breakfast time yet? Joe and Zach were down in Mexico. I think it was Juarez, I'm not sure. Might have been Mexico City. They had the show down there, and this was early on. And they got to drinking in a cantina and started bragging. Well, the Mexicans didn't think that the Millers had a cowboy that could throw one of their bulls. Well, they got to talking and bragging and what have you, and as I understand it, the bet was a pretty substantial bet. And they agreed, so Joe wired back to the ranch to have Bill and his horse get on the train and head south. And he got down there, and Bill got to pick out the bull he wanted, Bulldog. Well, he picked out this little speckled bull that they called Frioli, and he had didn't have a huge set of horns, but he had real pointed, real sharp.
Cow horn.
Yeah. Well, matador horns, really. Anyway, Joe wanted to nip the horns off so that he couldn't get hurt. Bill said no, he wanted all the horn he could get a hold of. So, and Bill had never been around any of those bulls, didn't realize just exactly how they act. And, you know, up here, every time you go out bulldog, the bull runs away from you. Down there, the bull comes at you. Anyway, he had his horse Bradley, and he was out there, and he had several passes. That bull would come after him, and he'd evade him with his horse. And he finally run over to Zach and said he wanted to change horses. Zach told him, you can't do that. Takes Bradley out there and bulldog that steer. Well, Bill went out there and made several more attempts, and he couldn't get around to that horse's or
Couldn't get beside
bull's
him.
horns because he was constantly trying to get in the back and gore Bradley. So he finally just went after him, and the bull got behind and gored Bradley in the rump, just buried his horn in there. Well, Bradley went down, and the bull pulled back, and Bill jumped on him. Well, the horns was full of blood, and they were slick as could be. But he got the bull down, and the agreement was that the timekeeper would time it out and then let him know when to let go of the bull. Well, he wasn't going to let go of that bull because he was going to come after him. But he didn't announce the time either. The Mexicans wanted Bill dead for coming down there and messing up their show. And Joe finally realized that there wasn't going to be an announcing that it was over, so he sent Zach and the cowboys out there to rope that steer and get him away from Bill. While Bill was holding on it, they were throwing anything they could find in the arena trying to knock Bill loose. Somebody threw a quart beer bottle and hit him in the rib, broke 3 ribs, but he held on. They got the bull off of him, and Bill ran over to his horse, who was laying down, and he thought he'd lost him. Bradley couldn't get up. And this little Mexican came out there with a bunch of them little bitty green bananas and told Bill that he would fix his horse. And he peeled a bunch of them bananas and crammed that wound plumb full of peeled bananas. 10 minutes later, Bradley stood up and walked out of the arena. And eventually it healed up, and he was as good a horse as ever. They had to call in the Army because the whole crowd was going to hang him. And the Army got him out of there and got him on their show, and
They done stepped
come
on
back
somebody's
to
toes.
in civilized country. But there was a time that Joe and Zach was down on the border, some little town down there, and they were sitting there watching the Mexican army fight Pancho Villa and his people, outlaws, whatever you want to call them. Well, Pancho Villa's men was getting the better part of the deal. And the Mexican government finally, in order to survive, crossed Rio Grande and surrendered to the Army. Joe and Zach immediately saw some dollar signs there, they bought that Mexican army. They bought everything that was there except soldiers' underwear. That's all they had left when Joe and Zach got done buying. They immediately sold all the small arms and the uniforms and everything right back to the Mexican government because they had to have them anyway. And they had hundreds of horses and mules, acres and acres of wagons. They had 6 Gatling guns and a whole bunch of cannon. They brought most all that back to the ranch.
They came home with their treasures.
They had an army of themselves back there.
Zach took one of the Gatling guns and put it up on top of the silo. At that time, they had the tall silo that was the water supply up on top, and then they had a short one. People say was a jail, but it was just a small. And they might have locked somebody in there. I don't know. But he had a Gatling gun up on top, and no doubt that he'd climb up there and rattle a bunch of 45-70s down the river. But the cannon are buried somewhere. We don't know.
Where is all this stuff actually at?
Now?
No, I mean, where was the ranch actually at?
It was about 9 miles southwest of Ponca City. You go out a mile or two west of town, you'll run into Highway 156, turn south on it. It's about 5-6 miles down there. If you cross the river, you've went too far, because the headquarters site is just north of the bridge.
Yeah, it's all not quite there anymore. It's
a lot of it, most of it's gone. We have when they sold the White House, and it was one of the last things to go, they sold it with the stipulation that whoever bought it had to tear it to the ground. I don't know whether they fully realized it when the builders built their first White House, which was a wood frame, 1.5 frame building in 1903. G.W. never lived in it because he died in February of 1903.
right.
You got telling me to quiet down? But that White House burned down in 1909, and then they started building the big White House. They had no intentions of it ever burning down. It was all concrete, asbestos shingles on top. Well, when they started tearing it down, they got to the first floor and they quit. The first floor bottom. So the basement, first floor is still there. There for a long time we had the store, but then arson got it. It got burnt down. We have the powerhouse where they used to produce their own electricity, and the floor, concrete floor of the bunkhouse, still there. The little den that the bear wintered in the wintertime is still there. The alligator pit is still there. The rest of it's, well, the basement or the slab floor of the elephant barn is still there. It's got the iron rings in the floor that they tethered the elephants to. Most everything else is gone. We've got a lot of podium signs and what have you to let people that come in there get some idea of what the ranch was like at one time. And we have some more ideas of things we're wanting to do out there.
Who burned it down, the store?
Nobody knows for sure. As I understand it, the night before it burned down, there was a bunch of new appliances, I don't know what, refrigerators, washing machines, on the porch. They weren't there when the fire burnt down. So it's their assumption that they moved it all off before they burnt the house down. But Zach, when the ranch was finally closed, he got that little area where the store was. and that's where he lived for a while. He later moved to town, had a little curio shop on South First Street that he sold Native American drums and arrows and bows and stuff like that. Then I'm not sure whether it was his daughter or what have you, lived out there for a while, and then it was rented out to somebody else. And that's when it went down. The barn was out there, or not the barn, the blacksmith shop was there for quite some time as I was in it, and then the river took it when it changed course and come around. When that happened, the state realized that they was going to lose Highway 156, so they came in and rip-rapped all that river around there, and now it's starting to go back into the old channel.
We're good. Let's kind of get a brief deal on the Marland part of it. You started in on it a minute ago.
You jump in anytime you want to.
Sure. You go.
I don't have any whiskey here to quench my thirst.
You said that somehow when Geronimo killed his last buffalo and his first buffalo, it did tie into Marland
Yes,
somehow.
it did. E.W. Marland lived up in Pennsylvania and got into oil, became a millionaire up there. And then the bank failure of 1907, I believe, took all his earnings. He was broke. I think he got a little on the depressed side and what have you. But his nephew down in Fort Sill had got acquainted with the Millers when they brought Geronimo up. And of course, sometime about that time, they started drilling over around
Three Sands?
Burbank.
Burbank.
Okay.
I know,
The big Burbank fields, the
Burbank
original
field,
fields. Yes,
right.
sir.
So he came out and got acquainted with the Millers. He stayed in the Arcade Hotel, and the Millers decided he could try drilling on the 101 Ranch. Molly staked the place where he would drill his first well, and it was just west of the White House. And this would have been the old White House. He drilled a well, and it was dry. He drilled, I believe it was 7 more after that, 6 or 7. Hit a little gas, but he didn't hit no oil. He was out riding one day, and he was off down where the Ponca Cemetery was, and looking at the rise. Of course, back then, of course, whites were the same way. You picked out a high knoll to put a cemetery on because you couldn't do anything else with it. Well, he wanted to drill on that hill. The Poncas wanted no part of that. So E.W. Marland got with Joe and George to see if they could convince the Poncas that he could drill out there somewhere. And through some negotiations, what have you, they finally told him he could drill north of the cemetery, which he did. He drilled there and he hit a gusher. Oil was flying up in the air. And some of the chiefs said that was a bad omen. It was going to be the end of the Ponca tribe. It'd be the end of the Millers, it'd be the end of the 101 Ranch. And it was pretty much true. When they got it controlled, it was pumping 120 barrels a day. And it pumped for years and years and years. The wellhead is still there. You can't get to it anymore, but I've got pictures of it. When I could, I went out there and saw it. But from right there, when he hit that oil, that started the 101 Ranch Oil Company. The Millers built a small refinery there. And from what I understand, it didn't.
So, Diversified.
Well, if you're named that, you got to do something. It didn't last very long because it caught fire and burned up. But while it was running, they was making about 90 gallons of gasoline a day. they had built a island right in front of the store there with gas pumps and oil pumps and what have you on that, and they sold gasoline. Well, E.W. Marland also was starting the Marland Oil Company in Ponca City, and I'm sure from then on, after the 101's refinery burnt down, they just bought their gas off of E.W. Marland. But that's the tie between the two. Well, E.W. Marland got rich, and of course, in that period of time, 3 Sands came up. George of the 101 Ranch, he was out buying leases all over the country, and of course, everybody else was too, Marland, a whole bunch of them. And that's what made 3 Sands so big. There was supposed to be around 20,000 people in that town, just sprung up all of a sudden, and I think it lasted about 10 years and died. But there's an ungodly amount of oil was pumped out of that little place right there. The demise of the ranch, Joe was the head of it, and he died in 1927. He was working on his car in the garage and had it running and died of carbon monoxide poisoning. That left George and Zach, and they continued. I think Zach was the one that started taking the show out on the road. But they was already having trouble with movies. They was having problems making money with it. George was in town in February of 1927 at a card game, and it was freezing rain outside. He was going to go back to the ranch, and everybody in there tried to talk him into staying overnight. Well, he decided to go anyway. And down south by the tank farm, there was a big curve. They've straightened it out now, but there was a curve there, and he went around that curve, lost control, flipped the car, and broke his neck. So he was dead. Zach took over, and he was doing the Wild West shows and running the ranch at the same time. But in the fall of 1927, the big bank failure happened again. Well, George had been borrowing money to buy all these oil leases, and when the bank failure came, they lost everything. And the government came in to sell out what the ranch had in order to pay off this debt. And they come in and sold everything they could think of. Well, you know, you had a bank failure, nobody had money. Things sold pennies on the dollar. What they couldn't sell, they threw in the river. There's a huge iron pile down there in the sand dune there, what used to be the river when it was in the old course. Pieces of iron sticking up. Anything that they could, they just threw in the river. The horse barn had a life-size horse up on top of the roof. That wound up in the river. And I have a hard time believing they'd just dispose of stuff like that, but they did. But Zach got despondent. He couldn't keep up with it and everything. The government people was coming in selling stuff off, and Zach was staying in the White House, and he was sicker than a dog. And 2 lawyers came up to the front door, and Zach went to the door, but he was packing a double-barrel shotgun. Well, the lawyers had the intention of kicking him out of the house. Zach unloaded that double-barrel shotgun right in front of their feet. And of course, they turned white and took off. But they went to the sheriff and wrote out a warrant for Zach's arrest. And the sheriff come down and drug him to Newkirk. Well, at that time, our governor was Alfalfa Bill Murray. If anybody remembers him, he was a very colorful governor. Well, Zach was a friend of Alfalfa's. So he sent the National Guard up here to get Zach out of the Hooskow. And they did. They took him out, and nobody ever made an attempt to arrest him after that. But
It pays to know people.
It does.
it do.
Everybody I ever known with the name Alfalfa was kind of a funny guy.
Well, and with what they had there, they knew just about everybody that was influential. But they would come to the Marland's Grand Hall and entertain with E.W. Marland. He had a bar down in the basement. I'm sure they all bellied up to the bar and had their drinks there, and that was during Prohibition, but it didn't bother E.W. Marland. He had all you needed to drink. I understand people couldn't drink on the ranch because Joe was a teetotaler. Now, whether he was or not, I don't know. I would assume there was probably a bottle in the White House. And there was bottles throughout. You figure the 101 Ranch had probably 3,000 acres of corn. And you got all these cowboys out there, and you got all this river bottom. There had to be some stills out there somewhere.
Corn liquor.
Henry Grammer was hanging out over there. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, Henry Grammer was another.
He was the
sorry
biggest.
I didn't get to taste any of it because it's probably pretty good.
They said he was one of he had a still with what was it, 500 gallons or a 5,000 gallon still? Something
Who was that?
amazing.
Wow.
Henry Grammer,
Oh, yeah, he was a big,
He was a bootlegger.
oh, yeah.
big time. But I know he was hanging out over there at the 101 quite a bit.
Oh, he was there a lot. He performed in the rodeos on Sundays. He was a heck of a roper.
They say he was a real good cowboy, but he was the last of the real outlaws too.
Yeah.
Well, you look at a picture of him setting a horse. He could set a horse.
You know, I feel like the memory of the 101 is still going strong. You guys got a great collection down there at the Marland Mansion of memorabilia from the 101.
Well, at the Marland Grand Hall.
The 101, I apologize. Holy moly, I can just see him side-eyeing me over there. Holy moly.
You're going to learn one of these days.
I'm going to learn.
Well,
Won't correct you, he says.
That's all I do. I usually learn a hard lesson about 3-4 times a week, to be honest with you. But
We're in the process of upgrading the museum. We had some problems with the house, and one room had to be replastered and painted. And so we're going to rearrange and make it all look like it's brand new. We hope to have it back together by 1st of May. And then we've got plans later on to really make some changes. So
Yeah, we've,
stay tuned.
and then you guys also have the 101, the 101 Ranch Collectors Show and maybe Old Timers Reunion. I'm not sure exactly what the name of it is. Tell us when that is and where that is.
It's the 101 Ranch Collectors Show. We have two groups in Polk City, the 101 Ranch Old Timers and the 101 Ranch Collectors. The Collectors put the show on every spring. This year it'll be April 12th and 13th at Fairgrounds at Blackwell. We'll have all kinds of memorabilia there. There'll be things to sell, things to just look at, food, you name it, it'll be there.
It's great. I've been to it before,
Great
and it's
show.
one of my favorite shows I've ever been to, and I've been to them all. And, I was watching TV the other day, and the biggest guy making movies and television shows today, the name of his production company is the 101 Productions. Taylor Sheridan makes Yellowstone,
Is that right?
made Bass Reeves.
I don't watch.
And you know what? I got to thinking just this morning, what the heck has he not made a mini-series about this 101 ranch?
there you go.
That's right. It could
You're
be
going to tear your
miniseries.
equipment up.
Holy moly! I get. Well, wouldn't it be just about the best show ever? They could do a whole series just on Bill Picket. You know, it could be
Yeah.
multi-year deal.
Well, I have had people from.
Why haven't they made a movie or anything about it?
It's been brought up a number of times. I've talked to people from California wanting to make a movie. They've never come up with somebody that will make it yet. There was
Taylor,
Taylor's a
do
man.
it, Taylor.
there was a lady called me one time. She wanted to do a series or a TV
Yeah, it needs to be a series.
show.
It can't just be a movie.
Well, she was wanting to do
Lonesome Dove
a show on, an hour-long show, and I told her, there ain't no way that you can tell a show or tell a story of the 101 Ranch in an hour show.
No.
You need to make it a series. Oh, that'd be great. But she never got back, so I guess she backed out of it too. But if they didn't come up with all the bad stuff, I want a show, but I want it to put the good side of the Millers and what have you.
Right.
So
I want to see it all.
Yeah, I'd like to see
The
whole
good,
thing.
bad, the
Good,
ugly, the
bad,
fun.
ugly. The whole deal. That's right.
but the history is there. All they got to do is say, hey, we're going to do it.
I think about Lonesome Dove, them guys leaving when they left Lonesome Dove. They took their wood and nailed it on their wagon.
That's right.
And
We don't rent pigs.
Yeah, we don't rent pigs. But I think about the stories and the I mean, you could go back and live the whole thing almost from the 101 that's already happened in the 1900s, So
You have quite a job on your hands too. You keep up the legend of the 101.
yes, the second weekend in June in Ponca City, be 6th, 7th, and 8th for the last 65 years, in fact.
Almost as long as the Ben Johnson Steer Open over here.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I'm making a competition out of it. Don't even know why I'm making a comp. Sorry.
Yeah, this is the 65th annual, June 6th, 7th, and 8th. PRCA Rodeo, Big O Rodeo, adds 5,000 an event. I mean, we get them all, 3 days. We have a dance every night. A local guy, Matt Williams, he's the Red Dirt King around Ponca, and he's Thursday night. A guy named Pryor Beard, been on Blake Shelton's the Team Blake and The Voice, and made the cut and went all the way to the semifinals. Great guy, good deal. And then we're going to do retro night, and we got Little Texas. So God bless Texas a little bit.
Oh, nice.
On Saturday night, so it's retro night. The girls need to get the Rockies out and dust them off. And get them starched up and come to the rodeo on Saturday night. It's going to be a little throwback time.
That's such a good rodeo. I remember, didn't they used to like buck buffalo or like a whole bunch of different kind of animals out to start the rodeo every night back in the day?
Back in the day.
I think they had buffalo in a chute and a longhorn in a chute and maybe like a yak in a chute. I don't even remember. It was wild.
That was one of Bronk Rumford's tricks. He put everybody on a horse, and I think he had a buffalo and an old longhorn kind of yak-like thing, and they just turned them all out at the same time, and they kicked the rodeo off. That was back a long time ago.
What? Speaking of Rumford, what about Justin Rumford? Is he y'all's clown over there?
No, Justin. He's
going on? That's his hometown.
Let me explain this. Let me explain this. Justin,
I need a drink.
Yeah,
I thought they had like the whole rump
chat,
room thing. They had like the party zone.
The party zone,
Yeah.
the VIP stuff. Well, yeah, we're
Dang
not
it.
going to do it this year, but Justin is going to be back in 25. So this year we've got award-winning clown of the year, Cody Sosby. So we got Cody Sosby. He's going to be our clown, our man in the can.
Yeah, he's done Cheyenne before.
Every year,
Yeah.
still does.
Oh,
clown
yeah.
of the year.
You know who I miss? Quail Dobbs.
Quail Dobbs.
God, I miss
Car
that guy.
The rare up.
Yeah, I know.
But, yeah, we got Cody Sosby's the clown. Sammy Andrews is the bucket stock. Been all over. Got the best of the best. I mean, when it comes time to get it first.
He's got those
He's got
bloodlines, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got the bloodlines. And then we got Garrett Jurgen as our announcer.
That's he announces Cheyenne, announcer of the year. Last year or the year before.
Times, last 2 times.
He's the best. The best
He's
did
the best
the
of the
American
best.
the other day,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Wow.
Done the American the other day.
That's a big name.
He's done the American for the last 4 or 5 years.
That's a big name.
That's a big
I
name.
knew his dad.
Yeah.
What is dad? Dale Jurgen?
Dale.
Yeah.
He's right over here at Collinsville.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Bulldogger, wasn't he?
Bulldogger.
Yeah.
IPRA World Champion Bulldogger. Good guy.
You got it going on over there.
Yep. So anyway, we've got a lot of good stuff going on in Ponca City on June 6th, 7th, and the 8th. The dance after the rodeo. We got the parade on Saturday morning, bringing the kids. Thursday night's our family night for the kids and for the rodeo, the parade. We've got
I love it that you have a parade still for
we
the
have
rodeo.
a big parade.
That's great.
We got John Payne coming. He's our specialty act. He can't,
You know,
You gotta have
15-time
John.
PRCA Act of the Year.
right?
Did you know his very first show was in Ponca City
Right.
at the 101 Ranch Rodeo?
Right, exactly. And we're bringing him back for our 65th anniversary to try to make a bunch out of it. So he's going to be at our
He's
parade.
kind of carrying the torch for the old 101 Ranch nowadays.
Though 101 Ranch, we've got it going on, and we work good with the old timers with their exhibitions and stuff, and we try to make it a Wild West weekend.
I love it how you guys just keep up that old history over there. You're not, if you're ever around Ponca City, they haven't forgot about the 101 Ranch at all. At all.
Yeah, the 101 lives on at www. Look us up on Facebook. I don't know how to do that. But 101 Ranch Road, Wild West Rodeo.
Taylor Sheridan, get that mini-series made.
Yeah.
Multi-year deal. It'll be bigger than Yellowstone. More unbelievable stories and everything. I mean, it's just, this thing was just really something else. And it excites me. It intrigues me because the more I hear about it, they just did all kinds of crazy stuff. Terrapin turtle races.
Yes.
You know, I got a picture of it back here that someone donated to the museum sometime back of some of the terrapin races there.
Amazing.
And I think Quanah Parker's kids and stuff traveled with them at some point in time. And
I'm not sure about that. It's a good possibility.
yeah, I have a picture of the wagon that Quanah Parker's son used to travel in the 101 Ranch in the back here somewhere. I had to find it. And show it to
The
you.
people that came through that walked across the threshold of that place, you know, your Tom Hanks's, your Henry Grammers, your Will Rogers, your
Ben Johnson's.
I mean, there's a long list. I mean, it don't really stop.
Bill Picket. I mean,
Yeah.
how big was Bill Pickett? I mean, he was a superstar in his day. And, you know, you can say the name Bill Pickett today, and people that don't even know anything about rodeo know he has something to do with it.
Absolutely.
They know that he has something to do with it, inventing an event in rodeo. People that don't know anything about it.
Absolutely.
That's how big a name he is.
Yep.
Chief White Eagle. How big a name is that?
Jack Webb, he was the singing cowboy that his favorite thing was to shoot with a rifle a can off of his head. And he had an RCA recording contract for singing. It was amazing. And did he do trick roping? Jack Webb?
Do what?
Did Jack Webb do trick roping?
He did. Oh, he could rope 6 horses running side by side. He is a phenomenal trick roper and shooter, performer. And when the ranch went down, he bought, I think, about 3,000 acres of the ranch and kept it going. It's not there anymore, but when he died, he still owned part of the ranch.
And you know, the Millers also goes back to, we never did get into this, but Jimmy Gibbs Monroe, president of the WPRA, she's a granddaughter
Yeah.
of Zach.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It's a small world out
It's
there.
a very small world. Yeah, Jimmy Gibbs, and then there's some Miller family that lives in Kentucky.
Weren't they originally all from Kentucky or so?
They started in Kentucky. Joe, I don't know what he would be, probably Joe Jr.'s son. He lives over in Bella Vista, Arkansas. He comes.
To the rodeo couple.
He's got a booth down there. I haven't seen him in a few years, but
There's a really good book that was wrote about the 101. It was called The Fabulous Empire, wrote back in the
Michael Wallace.
Michael Walls. What was it, in the 60s, Joe?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, late 50s, early 60s it was wrote, but it's a really good book. It's called The Fabulous Empire. It's hard to find, but they're out there.
I had one a while back that I read that an old trick roper wrote that lived on the 101 Ranch, 101
What was
Ranch.
his name?
I don't remember what the name was, but it was put out by the 101 Old Timers Association, this book.
Oh, Mike Sokol.
Probably. They talked about coming over here to Osage County all the time, and they'd go gather up a bunch of Drummond's cattle and have steer opens on them, and
steer
then they'd
opens.
slip right back over to the 101. So
And then, another thing, there was Schultz, and he goes down to Ty Murray. It's related to the Schultzes. So Ty Murray, has got ties up there with Nig Schultz. And what was he on the 101, Joe? Schultz.
He was a clown.
He was the clown.
Well, there was 3 brothers. Clarence, I think, was the clown. He had that bucking Model T or Model A, whatever they call it. He was the one that had that. That was his act out in the arena. The other 2 were cowboys. Can't remember names. I'm too old to remember names anymore.
They were kind of getting off on a rabbit hole, too.
yeah, I mean, honestly, we could go on and on and on and on and on. Honestly, there's just so much to get through and cover, but I guess we're going to have Joe back over again.
Okay. Well, we've got the museum down there in Grand Home, and people want to come in and see it. If they let us know ahead of time, I'll be glad to come down and talk about the history.
You can go to
Bring
Wool
lunch
Rock.
so you can stay for a while.
You can head over there to Wool Rock, see the $10,000 saddle. I think something else.
Yeah. And
There's a lot of stuff around there. There's a lot of memorabilia. I got a couple 101 ranch saddles right here in the back.
Well, Wool Rock is, I've got good relations with them. This will be the first year that I didn't go over and get some of their stuff to display in this show. But I've had Zach Miller's saddle over here at our show a couple of times. And next year we'll probably have some more stuff.
Well, that's a fancy saddle, isn't it?
Oh, man. It's made out of buffalo hide.
Is that what it is?
The Zach's was the other one you're talking about. That thing, it was just completely festooned with silver and gems, and
Take a good horse to haul it.
that was his show horse. Well, he had Ben Hur. He was a big stallion.
So many questions. There's this guy that had a Pawhuska address named Indian Joe. He was a trick roper. I got some pictures of him back there. It was just, he could do the wedding ring around his body with his mouth, I think.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, I got a picture of it back there. Ain't that something?
Yeah. They ain't no
They had the best ropers in the world over there at the 101.
Right.
I mean, that one book that the fellow wrote, it's nothing but about ropers. And then I was just intrigued through the whole book.
Right.
It just really something else.
They had time to practice. Us people here, we wouldn't have that kind of time. We don't make time. We always.
Well, you haven't hung around guys like me and Hank.
We gotta make time. Yeah. Some say Miller time. We'd say it's time to go rope.
That's right.
Show me
we
how
used,
you ropes one of these days.
Yeah.
we used to rope 3 times a day, Hank. In the morning,
Noon,
once when it got real good and hot, and then in the evenings.
then late at night.
Yep.
Morning, noon, at night.
That's how we roped every day. But
You don't still do it? What's the
He
matter?
might want to, but
You
I
get old?
have no hankering.
my roper's broke right now. My 70-year-old dad, he with 2 brand new knees, he's still tying steers down them.
Yeah.
So
You can't give it up.
so he's about to talk me in. If he can do it, I can do it. So
He's gonna make you run one here before long.
well, my girls, I don't think's ever seen me run a steer, so I'm gonna have to at least crack back out a couple times so my kids can see me rope a couple, Hank.
Let them see it.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, we sure appreciate y'all coming.
I enjoy
Get
it.
down there and see the Marland. Get over here and see the Ben Johnson. Second week in June, get over there and see Hank
Yeah.
in Ponca City. And
Yeah.
Jimbo, get well soon. We're all thinking about you.
Jimbo, hope you get healed up.
All right. We'll see everybody next week. Thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you.